Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Ask, Learn, Grow, the show where the Reef team answer questions and share insights and updates from the digital marketing industry. Joined today with Matt Dove, one of the leadership team members here at Reef, and we're going to be talking about why you should combine SEO and PPC. So I guess most of the time, or in a lot of cases, these are still sort of seen as separate channels, organic search and paid search. So I guess, Matt, why do you think that is, first of all, that in many cases today they're still seen as very separate entities?
Yeah, so thanks, Scott. Good to be back again. So I think, it's probably for two sort of main reasons. One, I think it's probably because it's one of those things that's just been inherited from the way that traditional agencies always managed advertising. And, it's that idea that there's a sort of linear campaign strategy with a media buying plan born out of it. And that plan is then handled by media buyers before it's executed across various channels. Each of these channels being a different line item, so often managed by more than one team or channels being completely independently managed. So in search, I think what happened was that we ended up with sort of paid search being managed by a PPC team, and organic rankings managed by an SEO team or a technical web team, even sort of back in the day. And because the two were seen as mutually exclusive, you then have copy, creative and content handled separately too. So I think the second reason is because I think it's more straightforward for agencies and businesses to think about these kind of linear conversion paths and channel specific return on investment. So we invested this much and in return we got this much, rather than reality, which is a sort of complicated blend of multiple channels and customers, like, let's be honest, behaving quite erratically during the buying cycle.
Yeah, Google recently did quite a big guide or white paper on this and referred to it as the messy middle.
That's right. Yeah.
As well. So we often hear about traditional approaches that aren't quite right for digital, but why isn't it right to search as a channel, like the traditional approaches to this?
Well, what this sort of siloed management style doesn't really account for is the sort of more nuanced way that specifically search works. And I mean, the same applies to the wider digital landscape too, really, but particularly with search, it doesn't account for the role it plays in the modern customer journey, or that kind of messy middle that you talk about, the sort of buying funnel, So, I mean, it's just after midday. I've already ran sort of 20 search queries today already. I'm sure, you have, I'm sure the people watching have as well. Who knows how many more I'll make today. So because search is such a dynamic environment with so many, different ways to interact with it, sort of paid ads, organic listings, maps, images, shopping, and the fact that really anyone can be present there on a global level. Your ability as a marketer, or rather effectiveness, to be able to seize the attention of audiences predictably fluctuates on a daily, if not an hourly basis. So there's that. Now, I think it's easier for business to split channels up and look back at historical data and say, well, we expect this to happen and that to happen, so we'll give X amount of budget to this channel and Y amount of budget to that channel, and off you go, good luck. Now, there's more predictability with paid than organic for sure, but it's all controlled by several incredibly complex algorithms, which is hard for even the people at Google to predict. Because there's just so many variables to it, and by its very nature, it's not like Sundar Pichai is sitting over in Mountain View in front of a big control desk, like twisting dials and pulling levers. There's a lot of ambiguity with it, which means while it's one of the most lucrative growth marketing channels, it's also super difficult to manage properly long term, particularly if you're aiming to continue that growth.
So what are some of the things that can influence the performance of search specifically, that are outside of our normal view or control, perhaps? Like, what kind of impact does that have?
I think it's I think it's things like it's weather, temperature, through to politics, new legislation, even things like changes to product safety regulations, and that's before we get to competitors, absolutely capsizing an auction field, and in some cases almost redefining the barriers to entry in certain categories, because they're simply willing to suddenly outbid everyone else, and before you know it, the ROAS just isn't even there anymore because the CPCs have gone through the roof, although Google does a better job of managing that these days. And I mean, just with Google ads alone, you're really dealing with a kind of economic environment worth about $130 billion swirling around in it globally. I mean, that's the same GDP of some small countries. So, good luck predicting that as a marketing person. I mean, even with all of the modeling in the world, it would be near impossible to do with any degree of accuracy, really. I mean, there are tools out there. But, if we look at organic search, it's things like core algorithm updates. So, some are barely noticeable, some of those updates. Others are, let's be honest, catastrophic for some businesses, particularly if, there's been sort of dodgy SEO tactics that have been used to gain quick wins and rankings suddenly drop. So I'm not talking about penalties here, but that too, which is why you really need to keep an eye on top of your backlink profile and make sure who's managing it knows what they're doing, because it's really important. And I've spoken to lots of people who've fallen victim to really ugly backlink profiles, and it's not good, But there's also first-party changes that sort of might go unnoticed by marketers too. So that's things that are kind of within your control, or as a company within your control. And then it could be things like technical infrastructure of the website, CMS updates, site migrations, or even seemingly quite innocuous updates to page content that might just seem like a styling thing, but it could be like a bulk update or global changes, which can all just sort of leave you wondering what the hell happened to my traffic, and again, that's before we look at competitors, so with organic search, it's just as pertinent. So people launching strong SEO strategies, technical SEO, content marketing, and really strong link building is a threat, from other people. I think it's other brands getting a surge in press exposure, that could boost their relevancy and make them suddenly hugely more visible, or even something kind of unintentional, like a blog post that's just suddenly gone viral for some reason that somebody's written, or a new product launch that the market picks up and it gets on top of and starts really raving about. So you just can't assume that what worked last quarter or last year will work again. And when we're looking at search channels on a singular level, that's really important. So when you hear about people testing paid versus organic search, it just seems a bit strange to me. I mean, sure, there's going to be exceptions there. Like, for example, certain fields can have exceptionally expensive keywords. So it's just not worth it for some businesses. I admit, but because the return on advertising spend, the ratio just isn't there. And over time, it doesn't really change. But I mean, really, if search is where the attention of your audience is, then you need to be there as frequently and as meaningfully as possible, which means paid and organic as an integrated activity is really a no-brainer in most cases. And so, the point with all of this is that if we look at people just running paid search, you've got so many factors influencing the performance of that one channel alone, even though it's the same channel as organic search, obviously. There's really an element of risk involved in either only using this one channel or not thinking about the other lens that people, your customers or prospective customers, are actually viewing the search results through, which is, in this case, SEO.
So it sounds like then in most cases, running both paid and organic search together is probably the best option for the majority of the cases. So great. What if that's not possible though, due to budgets, red tape, resource allocation, whatever it may be? How would you make the case for running both together?
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And I think a lot of the time it's making the whoever you report to, the more senior people within the business, or the business owner, more, or the board, more aware of the situation, because it's really important stuff. No matter how great you are at PPC, you're going to be absolutely hemorrhaging opportunity if you haven't got a strong organic presence too. And the same is also true of SEO, but arguably to a lesser extent in some cases. So I guess it really just comes down to how comfortable you are with that, and for how long. Because if there isn't someone dominating a category, it's only a matter of time before someone kills it with just an awesome content strategy in organic search, or starts scaling paid with a new round of investor funding, or something. So if you're running paid and not organic, and that's because you tried it and it didn't work for some reason, I'd say try and try again, because find someone new to help you do it differently. Because unless you're an outlier, you already have that business case for SEO. Otherwise, you wouldn't keep spending money on paid traffic, and that's why you're far better off not separating them out, or only running one of them. So I think from a financial standpoint, you've got to look at kind of two variables here. And one's the cost of the keywords that you currently don't rank for organically, where there's opportunity there. I.e. keywords you want to rank for, where you think you'll get conversions. And then the second is the cost of clicks for those keywords with paid search. So depending on what you're running right now, you can look back at historical data, take into account the fluctuations that have occurred, the CPC growth trajectory, seasonality, and other things, and get a very rough estimate of what your future PPC might look like. There's a few tools out there that can do this for you, or you can use Google Keyword Planner to do it. You could just do it yourself, but you'll want to make sure you're able to incorporate some level of statistical analysis in this to get a clean data set to work with, and then extrapolate from. Now, the advantage, of course, is that you're able to incorporate the data you choose, which means you can blend organic and paid data together to get a clearer picture of where you're heading. But now to sort of, I suppose I should sort of circle back to my earlier point. With all the modeling in the world, it's not going to tell you what's going to happen. Nobody, although it does seem as though there's quite a few people now who seem to be able to say that they knew COVID was coming, or something similar was coming this year. But realistically, you're not going to know what's going to happen. And there are some really important things to understand. So I think when you're looking at making a case for both, one's got to be, the longer you buy traffic for, the more you'll spend over time, and you've got to ask that question, is that sustainable, and how long for? I think two, you'll eventually hit a ceiling with paid search, which means your return on advertising spend will eventually begin to decrease, and you'll have to invest disproportionate additional budget and time to make it work. And thirdly, you're going to remain very much exposed if you're relying solely on paid, for all the reasons that I mentioned earlier on, with all the different variables and components that are involved that are outside of your control. So I think the ideal outcome here is that we integrate paid and organic search into a single strategy, and you might not be able to do it today, but I think keep chipping away at whoever holds the purse strings. It needs to evolve over time. So that's regular reviews and adjustments, probably quarterly, in terms of strategy, not management and optimization. Obviously that's much more, closer in time. But obviously there's exceptions there with major red flags and events and things like that can throw it out. But there are a whole bunch of benefits to this. So number one, okay, you diversify your risk in search by building a much stronger presence in search across both paid and organic, which offers some protection against the changes we spoke about. Two, you're going to be able to control and improve your overall blended cost per acquisition or cost per lead, which over time is going to give you a far better performance outcome. And what I'm really talking about here is not looking at 6 months performance views, but 2 or 3 or even 4 year performance, which you should be doing if you're really taking this stuff seriously, or the business should be doing as a whole if you're taking it seriously. You actually, take up more. Another point would be, you take up more of the search results page as well, that real estate. And you start to build serious presence in the categories or topic areas that are most relevant to the business. So it's really the way to look at it. And so you can stop worrying about ranking for like a handful of keywords, or start, thinking about how you're going to dominate niches and build out towards wider areas. And I'd say the other thing as well is, site conversion rate is likely to increase too, because you're sending targeted traffic there, and it's likely to give you a much better quality of visitor than all your conversion optimization that your conversion optimization activity can take advantage of. It's going to get better, and your testing might actually work and stand a chance. So that's nice. But finally, I'd say you also get an edge on your competition, because believe it or not, most people aren't managing paid and organic search like this. So it's a great opportunity. And even if your competitor has on the surface a huge amount of organic presence and enviable rankings, integrating your search strategy like this can really help you get the growth that you need. And I think that's what's really important. It's really easy to look at a competitor and say, wow, wouldn't it be awesome if we were number one for X keyword term? But it's what you need and how you need to manage that scalability to get you the wins that you want. So I think that, the key takeaway is that firstly, it's not rocket science. It's just about being efficient and structured and not getting too bogged down or stagnant with how you approach paid and organic search. So I think it's definitely worth thinking about and just what the impact of that might be on what you're really trying to achieve.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Matt. You've given people quite a lot to think about there, I suspect. And I presume people might have questions too. So feel free to send them in, and we'll be happy to help and answer anything that you may want to discuss. If you want to put a burning topic or a problem to the team, feel free to send those in too, and we'll see what we can do for a future video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be notified of when the next video is available as well. And apart from that, thanks all for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.